My name's Emily Parker, I'm 23 now, but for most of my life I clung to the idea that family was supposed to be your safety net. I believed that no matter how rough things got, your parents would hold you up, especially if you'd done everything they asked. For nearly 19 years, I was the perfect daughter, top grades, hundreds of volunteer hours, perfect attendance, and even a personal letter of praise from our town's mayor. At every reunion, I was their trophy story, the future neurosurgeon from Maple Ridge, Texas. But that illusion came crashing down on a balmy summer evening. If you've ever had to claw your way toward your goals while the very people you counted on turned their backs, tell me about it in the comments. And if this hits home, like, share, and subscribe. You never know whose courage you might spark when walking away is the only choice left. I can still hear my mother's voice from that night, steady, almost gentle, but stripped of warmth. "We've checked the budget again," she said, avoiding my eyes, "and there's just no way we can cover your tuition at Vanderbilt." I waited for the part where she'd say, "But we'll make it work." That part never came. 2 weeks later, I stood in the driveway with half our extended family watching as my father handed my younger brother, Ethan, the keys to a shiny new Ford F-150, deep blue paint, oversized bow, and a custom plate that read "Easy Ride." "This is for your future," Dad said proudly, patting his shoulder. I didn't speak. I couldn't. I just stood there, letting their cheers echo while my world quietly folded in on itself. That was the moment I understood. The same people who had told me to dream big had never intended to invest in those dreams, unless they belonged to a son. Looking back, the clues had been there all along, subtle, but stacking up like bricks in a wall I refused to examine. We lived in a small ranch-style home just off County Road 12, always neat, like our picture-perfect family image. My dad, Mark Parker, had spent over 25 years at the county utilities department. My mom, Linda, worked part-time at the district's administrative office. Every spare dollar, they said, was being tucked away for my education. "You'll be the first doctor in the family," Dad would tell me, his voice thick with pride. "We're saving everything for you." Anytime I asked for what other girls got, new clothes, concert tickets, spring break trips, Mom would give me that soft smile and say, "College comes first, Emily, always." And I believed her. Every single time. Ethan was 3 years younger, all easy charm and restless energy. While I spent nights buried in anatomy flashcards, he was usually outside tinkering with old engines or driving dirt roads with his friends. School bored him, but Dad adored his mechanical instincts. "He's got the kind of skill you can't teach," Dad would say, watching Ethan work in the garage. I didn't mind, we were close. I helped him scrape by in history. He made sure no one messed with me at school. "You two balance each other," Mom often said. Emily with the brains, Ethan with the grit. I believed we were equals. But when they chose a $55,000 truck over the 4-year plan I had bled and sweated to build, I learned that fairness in our house had conditions. Love had limits. And I would never see my parents the same way again. That night, the night of the truck, I barely slept. I lay in my bed, the glow of that Ford still seared into my mind. Downstairs, I could hear the faint hum of celebration, dishes clinking, my parents laughing, Ethan recounting his big surprise for the 6th time. I stayed frozen in my room, trying to stitch my old beliefs together with the truth that had just ripped through them. But that truth hadn't been born that night, it had been lurking quietly in the background for years. Maple Ridge is the kind of place where everyone remembers your kindergarten teacher, your high school jersey number, and which brand of lawnmower your family owns. Just under 8,000 people, 2 traffic lights, and 1 high school, Maple Ridge High, where I spent 4 years building exactly the kind of resume my parents claimed to want for me. I wasn't born brilliant, I worked for every accolade. Late nights at the kitchen table with textbooks stacked like towers, early mornings cramming equations in the passenger seat while Mom drove me to student council, weekends spent volunteering at the local clinic while my friends went tubing at the river. Every no to a social invite felt like a yes to my future. "Just a couple more years, kiddo," Dad would say, "and it'll all pay off." My teachers spotted me early. By 3rd grade, I was breezing through novels most kids wouldn't touch until high school. In middle school, I skipped ahead in math, and by my junior year, I was earning dual credit hours at the community college. I was the Parker girl, the smart one, the future doctor. People had expectations, and I intended to meet them. Ethan's path was different, more at home under the hood of a truck than in a classroom. His grades scraped by, but his charisma drew people in. Coaches liked him, neighbors greeted him like family, and Dad lit up every time Ethan talked about engines. He could fail a chemistry quiz on Tuesday and fix the lawnmower on Wednesday, earning more praise for that than I did for acing an advanced physics exam. I never saw us as rivals. We had different strengths, different lanes in life, or so I thought. We looked out for each other. He'd show up with coffee during my study marathons. I'd slide him answers during Spanish quizzes. He once got suspended for shoving a guy who called me stuck-up, and I loved him for it. I never resented Ethan, until I realized he wasn't just being encouraged. He was being put first. Looking back, the hints were scattered through the years like puzzle pieces I refused to fit together. Dad would spend entire Saturdays teaching Ethan how to swap out brake pads while I was in the kitchen scrubbing dishes. Mom would gush to neighbors about his easy charm, yet my academic awards were brushed off as just Emily being Emily. When Ethan flunked algebra, Dad said he was figuring out his own direction. When I scored a 92 in physics, they wanted to know what went wrong. Still, I clung to the belief that their love was balanced. I convinced myself that once college came around, all those little imbalances would even out, that they'd back me the way I'd always backed them. That belief carried me through high school, until it didn't. Until the truth arrived, not in a blowout argument, not in some tearful confession, but in the rumble of an F-150's engine and a ribbon wrapped around it like a beautifully packaged betrayal. I used to think that playing by every rule, doing everything right, meant life would pay you back in kind. I couldn't have been more wrong. Sometimes the people who give the most end up being the easiest to overlook. By the start of senior year, everything finally felt like it was lining up perfectly. I'd kept my grades high, stacked my resume with awards, earned the respect of my teachers, and piled up more extracurriculars than a single application could hold. On the outside, I looked unstoppable. On the inside, I felt like I was flying. College was now a nightly topic at the dinner table. Vanderbilt, Duke, Tulane, every competitive pre-med program ended up in our family planning sessions. Mom even built a color-coded spreadsheet and pinned it to the kitchen corkboard, with columns for tuition costs, deadlines, scholarship options, and travel distances. "I've been setting money aside since you were still in onesies," she'd say, tapping the spreadsheet. "We'll use scholarships and maybe a small loan to cover the rest. We're ready." Dad would nod and repeat his favorite line, "Nothing's more important than setting you kids up right. Ethan's got the hands-on skills, you've got the brain, different tools, same destination." The only feeling better than getting those acceptance letters was seeing my parents' faces when I opened them. The night I tore into my Vanderbilt envelope, rain was coming down in warm sheets, drumming against the windows. I jogged to the mailbox, came back dripping, the thick envelope shaking in my hands. That kind of envelope usually means good news. I ripped it open, read the first sentence, and let out a scream. Within seconds, Mom and Dad were in the hallway, and Ethan leaned out from the garage, curious. My voice shook as I read, "We are delighted to offer you admission to Vanderbilt University with a partial merit award." Dad hugged me so tight my ribs protested. "We're celebrating," he announced. "Angelo's Steakhouse. You've earned it." Angelo's was as close as Maple Ridge got to fine dining, white tablecloths, candlelight, and desserts so expensive they skipped printing prices. That night, they toasted with sparkling cider, and even Ethan, who hated dressing up, lifted his glass. "To our future doctor," Dad said, eyes shining. And I believed it. I believed they were proud. I believed they were ready. I believed all the sacrifices I'd made were about to mean something real. The weeks after that were a whirlwind. I locked in my fall schedule, chose a dorm, joined the private group chat for incoming pre-meds. Mom and I hunted for bedding and organizers. Dad surprised me with a new laptop. Even Ethan started referring to my departure as "when she heads to Nashville." Every sign pointed to my dream finally coming alive, and I clung to that certainty, because when someone tells you again and again that you're worth the investment, you don't prepare for the day they take it back. Summers in Maple Ridge were always thick with humidity, alive with cicada songs, and set to a predictable rhythm. But the summer after graduation felt different. Uneasy. It started small, quiet things. Conversations that cut off when I entered the room. Dad rubbing his temples at the kitchen table while unpaid bills sat in a neat stack. Mom scanning grocery receipts like each number was a personal insult. I brushed it all off. Big moves are stressful, I told myself. Transitions are messy. And every time I asked, They swore everything was fine. I wanted so badly to believe them that I didn't see the truth creeping in from the edges. One Sunday evening, the air in our house felt heavier than the sticky summer heat outside. Ethan was off at a bonfire with his friends, and I was in the kitchen helping Mom chop vegetables for dinner. Dad came in from the backyard, wiping his hands on a dish towel. "Can we sit for a minute?" he asked, nodding toward the dining table. There was something in his voice that made my stomach clench. I sat down, fingers laced in my lap, ignoring the strange chill creeping into a mid-June night. He didn't ease into it. "Emily, your mom and I have been going over the budget again, and Vanderbilt might not be possible anymore." I stared at him, waiting for the rest, for the fix, but here's how we'll make it work. Mom kept her eyes on her water glass, spinning her wedding band round and round. "What do you mean?" My voice came out quieter than I expected. "We've been planning this for years." Dad sighed, slow and heavy. "Some of our investments didn't bring in what we hoped, and with prices climbing, we just don't have the extra buffer we thought we would." Mom finally looked up, her tone measured. "We still want you to get your degree. Maybe you start at the community college here, save some money, and then transfer later." It felt like the ground tilted under me. "You told me we had savings. You told me a small loan would cover the rest. You told me this was the plan." Dad gave a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Life throws curveballs, kiddo." That night, my dinner went cold on the counter. I sat on my bed surrounded by Vanderbilt brochures and orientation forms, trying to keep my breathing steady. Every promise from the past year replayed in my head, every "we've got you," every "we're proud," every toast to my future. Now, I was expected to shrink my dream to fit their revised version of reality. The following days blurred into a cycle of number crunching and desperate pitches. I hunted down every last-minute scholarship still accepting applications, calculated part-time job options, looked up federal loan caps, even suggested deferring a semester to save money. Each plan I placed on the dinner table was met with the same sympathetic expression and another no. "Let's be practical," Dad said one night. "We don't want you starting your adult life drowning in debt." "But you were fine spending on my dream until now," I blurted, my voice cracking. Their silence was louder than any argument. That was the moment I began to suspect this wasn't just about finances, it was about shifting priorities, ones I hadn't been let in on. I wanted to believe their explanations. I clung to them like a life raft, because if I didn't, I'd have to face what my gut was telling me. But doubts grow fast, even in quiet corners, and once they start, they're impossible to ignore. The first clue came with the receipts. A week after that talk, I spotted a large box in Mom's trunk, brand new patio furniture. "Clearance deal, too good to pass up," she chirped. Then came Dad's work trip to San Antonio for a 3-day fishing getaway with coworkers, hotel included. And the biggest one, our annual family trip to Canyon Lake, still marked in red on the calendar, booked and paid for. But my tuition? That was somehow unaffordable. I told myself it might just be sloppy money management, that people sometimes made odd financial choices. But the knot in my stomach refused to loosen. One afternoon, while rummaging in Dad's home office for a stapler, I came across a pile of bank statements. I wasn't snooping, at least, not at first, but one page slipped loose. My eyes locked on a number, $68,200 in savings. It wasn't empty, not drained by emergencies. That figure followed me down the hall like a shadow. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, questions circling like vultures. If they still had money, why wouldn't they help? Ethan got home late that evening, barging in with his usual noise, whistling as he dug through the fridge. "Where were you?" I asked. "Garage with Kyle," he said casually. "Dad's helping me get ready for after graduation." "Ready for what?" He shrugged, grinning. "Just stuff. It's a surprise." That word stuck in my head like a splinter. A few nights later, walking past my parents' room, I heard them arguing in low voices. I froze. "We should just tell her," Mom said sharply. "And say what exactly?" Dad shot back. "You know this is the right call. It's what's best for the family." "She's going to figure it out, Mark. She always does." Their voices dropped, and I slipped away, heart pounding. I didn't know the full story yet, but I knew this much: the money wasn't gone. It had just been redirected. After that, I noticed everything. Mom humming while arranging flowers on her new patio set. Dad laughing on the phone with Uncle Rob about timing it perfectly. Ethan's little smirk whenever I asked about his surprise. Something big was coming, and whatever it wasn't for me. Ethan's graduation landed on one of those sweltering June afternoons where the Texas sun clings to your skin like it has a grudge. The high school gym was overflowing, folding chairs creaking under the weight of proud parents, the air a mix of cologne, hairspray, and wilting carnations. I sat wedged between Mom and Dad in the third row, our last name printed neatly on a seat sign, Parker Family, Honors Graduate. Even that title felt like a joke. Ethan had barely kept a 3.1 GPA, his honor came from captaining the wrestling team and actually showing up most days. But that afternoon, he was the star. When they called his name, the room exploded with cheers. Mom shot to her feet, clapping like a high school cheerleader. Dad let out a sharp whistle, the kind he'd never once given me, not even when I graduated at the top of my class. I rose and clapped too, but the sound felt hollow, my smile a mask. After the ceremony, Mom herded everyone outside under the shade of a massive oak, the designated spot for family photos. Aunts and uncles I hadn't seen in years appeared with hugs. Grandpa Parker had flown in from Florida. Everyone was there for Ethan. I smiled for pictures beside him, jaw tight, pretending I belonged in the moment. But Dad kept glancing at his watch, Mom kept exchanging looks with Uncle Rob, and I could feel the shift in the air. "All right everyone," Dad finally called out, "follow us to the parking lot, we've got a little surprise." The words landed like a bucket of cold water. My chest tightened, but I followed, holding on to a thin thread of hope that maybe I was wrong. We turned the corner, and there it was, a gleaming silver Ford F-250 spotless massive, with a bow the size of a beach umbrella tied to its hood. I stopped dead. Dad dangled a key fob with the Ford logo, grinning from ear to ear. "Ethan's son, this is yours. For your next chapter. We couldn't be prouder." The crowd erupted, clapping, cheering, a few whistles. Ethan's jaw dropped. "Are you serious?" he asked, wide-eyed. Mom was already crying. "Of course, sweetheart. You've earned it." I stayed rooted in place, a stone in the middle of a river of celebration. That truck couldn't have been less than $55,000. Just 14 days earlier, they told me they couldn't manage $22,000 a year for Vanderbilt. But for Ethan, they staged a full-scale production, custom plates, a carefully timed reveal, cameras ready, even a cake shaped like the truck waiting back home. This wasn't last-minute generosity. This had been in motion for months. Uncle Rob clapped Dad on the back. "You went all out, Mark. A truck like that'll set him up right." Dad's chest puffed. "He's starting in the trades, needs dependable wheels. This isn't just a gift, it's an investment." Ethan slid behind the wheel, hands on the steering wheel like it was Christmas morning. And no one, not one single person, looked my way. Except Grandma June. She met my eyes for a heartbeat, then quickly turned away. The drive home was suffocating. From the back seat, I stared out the window while Mom and Dad replayed Ethan's reaction like a highlight reel. "Did you see his face?" "Perfect," Mom said, her voice glowing. "Perfect." That's what she called it, while my future was crumbling to dust. And in that moment, something inside me didn't just crack, it shifted permanently. They hadn't simply chosen his path over mine, they'd chosen him. The party ran late, streamers hung across the yard, music blasting Ethan's playlist, pulled pork sandwiches disappearing from paper plates. Guests gathered in clusters to admire the truck's chrome and oversized tires, talking about its horsepower like it was a family heirloom. I floated through it all, saying little, my smile glued in place. By the time the last guest left, my hands were still trembling from everything I hadn't said. I found my parents in the kitchen, rinsing dishes like it was any other night. "Can we talk?" My voice came out tighter than I wanted. "Of course, honey," Mom said, drying her hands. "Wasn't today amazing?" "The truck," I said evenly. "That had to cost at least 55 grand. Dad turned, his shoulders stiffening. "We got a great deal. One of my buddies at the dealership gave us a discount." "That's not the point," I said, sharper than intended. 2 weeks ago, you told me you couldn't afford $22,000 a year for my tuition. And now you hand Ethan a brand new truck. Make it make sense." Mom sighed. It's not the same thing, Emily. Why not? This was a one-time expense, she said quietly. College is 4 years, maybe more, and that's not even counting medical school. Dad stepped in, his voice calm but firm. Med school is a huge gamble, 8 years of debt with no guarantee at the end. Construction's straightforward. Ethan can start earning right away. I felt my pulse hammering. So this is about return on investment? Neither of them answered. You told me I'd be the first doctor in the family. You promised you were saving for this. Mom reached out to touch my arm, but I stepped back. Sometimes, girls have big dreams, she began softly, but life can change direction. You could meet someone in college, start a family. My jaw dropped. Are you actually saying you think I've been working my whole life just to get married and quit? That's not what she meant, Dad cut in. Ethan's following my path. This is about legacy, Emily. Men have always worked with their hands. Legacy. There it was, the unspoken word that tied the whole picture together. This had never been about finances or weighing risks. It was about tradition, about gender, about choosing the son, the heir, the name that carries on. I get it, I said quietly. So, if I'd been born a boy, we wouldn't be having this conversation? Dad's jaw tightened, color rising in his cheeks. Don't twist it. This isn't about that. But neither he nor Mom could look me in the eye. The silence between us was glass, clear, brittle, and one breath away from shattering. I'm done, I said finally. Done pretending this is fine. Done letting you spin it like this was beyond your control. My pulse roared in my ears as I turned and climbed the stairs to my room. Behind me, I heard the muffled clink of dishes, low whispers, the sound of a family splitting at the seams. Inside my room, I slid to the floor, pressing my palms over my mouth as the sobs hit, ugly, raw, unstoppable. It wasn't just grief for what I'd lost, it was rage at how quickly they let it go. Downstairs, their laughter from earlier had faded, but the damage hadn't. Because once trust dies in silence, no amount of words can bring it back to life. I didn't sleep, even after the house settled, after the last faucet stopped dripping and the lights dimmed. I lay on my bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind turning over every conversation, every promise. I didn't cry again. I didn't yell. Something colder had taken its place. I needed answers, proof. At 3 a.m, I swung my legs out of bed, turned on my laptop, and opened our shared family email account, the one we'd all used for utility bills and reminders for as long as I could remember. My school notifications still came through there. 2 quick searches, Ethan truck, and there it was, a chain of emails between Dad and a dealership in New Braunfels, stretching back nearly 5 months. Price negotiations. Financing options. Upgrade packages. An attachment labeled Final Agreement, Ford F-250 XLT. Every timestamp fell in the same weeks I'd been finalizing my Vanderbilt paperwork and asking them if the money was still there. Then I saw it, a message from Mom to Dad, dated 9 days before they sat me down. Truck will be ready for Ethan's graduation. Dealer says they'll keep it hidden in the service bay until pickup. Should we break the Vanderbilt news to Emily before or after? I'm worried about how she'll react. The glow of my laptop painted my walls a cold blue. My hands shook. It had never been about an empty bank account. It was about a choice, a deliberate, thought-out, prioritized choice. I hadn't been forgotten, I'd been traded. Fueled by a mix of fury and focus, I dug deeper. Dad's private folder sat on the desktop, laughably disguised as Mark Files, password protected with his birthdate. Inside, I found PDFs, account statements, investment summaries, not 1 but 3 savings accounts. They didn't have millions, but they had more than enough to send both kids down their chosen paths. They just hadn't wanted to. By the time sunlight slid through the blinds, I still hadn't moved from my desk. I just sat there, staring at the evidence, neatly filed, budgeted, time-stamped. The betrayal wasn't just emotional anymore, it was documented. I didn't expect a knock on my door that morning. I was still in my oversized Vanderbilt t-shirt, my laptop open, the damning emails glaring on the screen. The knock came again, followed by a voice. Hey, it's me. Ethan. I didn't respond, but I didn't tell him to leave either. After a pause, the door opened, and he stepped in, hair messy, pajama pants hanging loose, like this was any other morning. "Can I sit?" he asked. I gave a stiff nod, and he lowered himself onto the edge of the bed. "About the truck," he began, rubbing the back of his neck. "I know it looks unfair." "Looks?" I said flatly. He exhaled. "Dad's been planning to get me set up ever since I told him I wanted to go into construction. He's been pulling strings, lining up apprenticeships. The truck's part of that, for hauling gear, getting to job sites, that kind of thing." I stared at him. "And medical school isn't worth the same kind of investment?" He shrugged. "It's different. Dad says doctors just take out loans anyway. And," he hesitated, "I mean, eventually you'll get married, right? Your husband can help with that stuff." That last sentence landed like a punch I didn't see coming. It wasn't just Mom and Dad who saw me as temporary, as a phase, it was Ethan too. "It's not just about the truck," I told him quietly. "It's about what it stands for. About the fact that nobody in this house thought I was worth that kind of belief." He shifted uncomfortably. "It's not like that. Dad just thinks this is practical. He says construction's steady work. He even mentioned maybe helping me with a down payment on a place later, build some equity." "A house," I repeated. "After telling me there wasn't enough for college, they're planning to buy you a house?" "Maybe not right away," he said quickly, almost defensive. "You know how Dad gets, once he's set on something." "Do you think any of this is fair?" I asked. He hesitated before answering. "I don't know. Life's not fair, Emily. We're just on different paths. Yours is academic, mine's hands-on. Dad's just putting his money where he thinks it'll go the farthest." I stared at my little brother, the same kid I'd stayed up with until 2 a.m. finishing science projects, the one I'd helped pass history, the one I'd defended and covered for more times than I could count. I had poured into him my time, my patience, my loyalty. And here he was, parroting our father's reasoning like it made perfect sense to hand him a truck and dangle a house while telling me to shrink my dreams. "We're not okay, Ethan," I said flatly. He blinked. "What?" "I know you came in here to make sure things were fine, to make sure I'm fine, but I'm not. Not with you. Not with any of this." He gave a slow nod, stood, and left without another word. When the door clicked shut behind him, I didn't cry. I just sat there, breathing shallowly, locked in the truth I could no longer unsee. It wasn't that I had failed them, it was that I had been raised to think I could earn something that was never meant for me at all. By the time I came downstairs the next morning, I had made up my mind. No more polite questions. No more hints or hope. I wanted the truth. Dad sat at the table with the morning paper, pretending to read. Mom was at the stove flipping pancakes, moving like it was any other Sunday. Ethan was nowhere around. "Can we talk?" I asked, my voice steady. "Sure," Dad said without looking up. I set my phone on the table, screen facing them. The email chain glowed back at them, the subject line reading, "Truck final pickup, confirmed." Dated nearly 5 months earlier. Mom froze mid-motion, spatula hovering over the pan. Dad folded his paper slowly. "You've been planning Ethan's truck for months," I said, "long before you told me Vanderbilt was off the table." Dad's voice was low, hard. "You went through our emails?" "Our shared family account," I said evenly. "The same one I've used for years. The one where you discussed which lie to tell me and when." Mom sat down, eyes wary. "Emily, it's not. It's exactly what I think," I cut in. "You chose Ethan. You lied about the money. And you lied about why." Dad's hand came down on the table, rattling the plates. "That's enough. We made a parental decision about where our resources would go. We don't owe you a justification." "Actually you do," I said, my voice still calm. "You raised me to believe education mattered, that my work ethic would mean something, that your promises were real. You helped me apply to Vanderbilt, knowing you had no intention of helping me attend." "We support your goals," Mom said quietly, "just not at a school that expensive. There are other, more affordable options." "This isn't about public versus private," I said. "It's about the fact that you spent over $55,000 on a truck for Ethan, and claimed you couldn't cover $22,000 for me." Dad leaned forward, his expression set. "That truck is for work. He's starting a trade. He needs it." For a job he hasn't even started, I said. I've been proving myself for years, and you still told me no. My voice dropped. And I know you have the money. I saw the bank statements. You just didn't want to spend it on me. The kitchen went still. Mom stared at her lap. Dad's jaw worked for a moment before he finally said, "Since when do kids decide how parents spend their money?" "Since you taught me I mattered," I replied, and then punished me for believing it. Dad shoved his chair back, the legs scraping loudly on the tile. "I'm done with this conversation." But Mom put a hand on his arm. "Mark," she said softly, "just tell her." "Tell me what?" I asked. Her eyes shimmered. "She deserves to know why we made this decision." Dad let out a long-weighted breath, like he'd been holding it for years. "The truth is, putting money into a son makes more sense," he said finally. "Ethan will carry the Parker name. His success stays in the family. Yours doesn't." For a moment, I couldn't draw in air. "So that's it," I whispered. "You never saw me as part of the legacy." "It's not personal," Dad added quickly. "It's practical. Families have stayed strong for generations by sticking to traditional values." I turned to Mom, silently begging her to push back, to speak up, to see me. But she only nodded. "I know it sounds old-fashioned," she said, her voice wavering, "but we had to think long-term." And just like that, it was done. Not only the financial betrayal or the broken promises, but the truth I had been avoiding for years. I'd spent my whole life auditioning for a place in a family that was never going to see me as equal. Not because of who I was, but because of what I was. After that conversation, something inside me shut down. I didn't shout or slam doors. I didn't cry in front of them. I simply stopped expecting anything. And when expectations die, the illusion of belonging dies with them. That night, I sat on my bed, listening to the muffled clink of plates and casual chatter drifting up through the floorboards, Ethan laughing at something on his phone, Mom asking Dad to pass the salad. Life kept rolling for them, just like that. But I couldn't unhear the truth. I was no longer an asset in their eyes. I was an expense they didn't feel was worth the cost. So I did the only thing that made sense. I opened my laptop and started planning my way out. I combed through scholarship listings, even the obscure ones buried on page 6 of search results, anything with late deadlines or niche requirements. Then one caught my eye, the Anderson Foundation Scholarship for Resilient Scholars, full tuition, housing, books, plus a living stipend. Only 4 awarded nationwide. Highly competitive, but the criteria hit me like a lightning strike. Awarded to students who demonstrate academic excellence and perseverance in the face of significant personal hardship. That was me. Exactly me. The application asked for a personal essay, 3 letters of recommendation, financial records, and a video interview. The deadline was in 12 days. I didn't hesitate. I drafted an email to Mrs. Bradford, my old guidance counselor at Maple Ridge High, even though it was almost midnight. "Mrs. Bradford, my parents have withdrawn all financial support for Vanderbilt. I need urgent help applying for emergency scholarships. Are you available tomorrow morning? Please, I'm not giving up. Emily Parker." At sunrise, I packed my backpack and slipped out of the house before anyone stirred. No note, no goodbye. I just left. The only place that felt safe was Maple Ridge Coffee and Books, with its free Wi-Fi and bottomless refills if you smiled at the owner. I checked my phone, bracing for missed calls or angry texts. There were none. Just silence, its own kind of answer. Mrs. Bradford's reply came at 7:04 a.m. "I'm here all morning. Come by whenever you're ready. We'll figure it out." No questions. No pity. Just a lifeline. Walking back into Maple Ridge High felt like stepping into a version of my life where I still belonged. The halls were silent, summer break had emptied the place, leaving only the hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional buzz of a printer. Mrs. Bradford's office looked exactly as I remembered, stacks of brochures spilling across her desk, a framed diploma from a state university, a little fern named Henry in the window. When she looked up and saw me, she didn't waste time on small talk. "Come in, Emily. Sit down. Tell me everything." And I did. I told her about the money, the emails, the truck, and the moment my parents admitted they had chosen Ethan because he was the son. She listened without interrupting, her jaw tightening more than once. By the end, her concern had hardened into quiet outrage. "I've known your parents for years," she said softly. "I never imagined they'd do this. But I'm glad you came." I nodded, too drained to say much. "Let's focus on what you can control," she continued. "The Anderson scholarship is a long shot, but if anyone has a chance," she didn't finish. She just flipped open her laptop. For the next 6 hours, we built my application like we were piecing together a lifeboat. The essay came first, 1,000 words that had to capture not just my achievements, but the obstacles I'd faced and how I'd kept moving forward. "This isn't about pity," Mrs. Bradford reminded me. "It's about resilience. Show them who you are without begging for sympathy." So I wrote about late nights at the kitchen table while my family watched TV, about turning down every distraction to keep my GPA perfect, about sitting through a dinner where they toasted Ethan's truck while my Vanderbilt acceptance letter sat unopened in my bag. I wrote until my hands cramped. Next came the recommendations. We reached out to Mr. Hale, my AP biology teacher, Coach Ramirez, who oversaw the volunteer program at the local clinic, and Mrs. Bradford herself. Each promised to submit their letters by week's end. For the financial documentation, we used what I had: screenshots of the account balances I'd found, the FAFSA forms I'd already completed, and a written statement explaining the sudden loss of parental support. "They'll verify it all on their own," Mrs. Bradford assured me. "What matters is that you tell the truth." By the time I left her office, the sun was slipping low behind the school parking lot. We weren't finished, nowhere near, but I no longer felt like a passenger in my own life. I wasn't waiting for my family to change anymore, I was changing the path without them. That quiet but seismic shift felt like the first deep breath I'd taken in weeks. Walking into the house that evening felt strange, not tense, not loud, just vacant, like I'd wandered into someone else's home. The same cinnamon and lemon scent drifted from the kitchen, Ethan's work boots still sat by the back door, the couch cushions were still slouched in the familiar way, but I didn't belong to it anymore. We barely spoke. Mom left a plate of food outside my door, like I was some polite ghost in the hallway. Dad passed me in the living room without a word. Even Ethan, who'd once barged into my room without knocking, now avoided meeting my eyes. They all knew I'd seen too much, and none of them knew how to deal with the version of me that no longer stayed quiet. In that silence, I worked. For the next 10 days, every spare moment went into the Anderson Foundation application. I wrote, rewrote, and edited until my fingers ached. Mrs. Bradford checked in daily with notes and encouragement. Mr. Hale's letter arrived early. Coach Ramirez delivered his in person, standing at our front door like proof that someone outside these walls still believed in me. I set up camp wherever no one would interrupt me, the unused sunroom, the garage, even the staircase. It wasn't about hiding, it was about guarding the momentum I'd built. When you're building your escape route, distractions aren't just annoying, they're sabotage. The only real conversations came from Mom, and they were thin attempts at mending what she wouldn't admit she'd broken. Little things like, "Have you reconsidered community college? We can help with books if you stay local, or you know we love you, right?" Each comment felt like trying to patch a dam with tissue paper. I stopped answering. She noticed, but she didn't press. Dad stayed silent. Ethan tried once, knocked on my door and mumbled about watching a movie downstairs. I didn't go, not because I hated him, but because there was nothing left to say that wouldn't splinter us even further. On the 11th day, I submitted it, a 2,000-word essay, 3 strong recommendations, every piece of required documentation. In the final comment box, I typed just one line: "Thank you for considering me. This isn't only about education, it's about reclaiming the future I was told I couldn't have." When I hit send, it felt like surfacing for air after being underwater too long. Not exactly hope, not exactly relief, but oxygen. 3 days later, the email came. Subject line: Anderson Foundation Interview Invitation. Scheduled for Monday at 10 a.m., 5-person virtual panel. My hands trembled as I read it. I wasn't scared, not exactly, but when you've been clawing your way toward a future that kept slipping from reach, moments like this feel almost sacred, like the world has finally decided to listen. I texted Mrs. Bradford immediately. "I got the interview." She replied in seconds, "My office is yours. Come early and we'll run a tech check. You've got this." I hadn't told my parents about the scholarship, not because I wanted to hide it, but because they'd forfeited the right to be part of this chapter when they walked away from the last one. Monday came quickly. I left before dawn, wearing the single blazer I owned, black, fitted, borrowed years ago for a debate tournament. My stomach was in knots, but my stride was steady. Mrs. Bradford greeted me with coffee and a grin. "You ready?" she asked. "As ready as I can be," I said. We ran a quick tech check: camera position, mic clarity, desk lamp lighting. At 9:58, she gave me a reassuring nod and stepped out, closing the door softly behind her. The interview screen flickered, and 5 faces appeared, 5 strangers who suddenly held the weight of my future. The panel included the scholarship director, 2 university reps, a private donor, and a former Anderson recipient now studying medicine at Johns Hopkins. They each introduced themselves warmly, and then we began. The first questions were straightforward: my academic record, why I wanted to pursue medicine, why Vanderbilt, and why now. Then the real ones came: what's the toughest obstacle you've faced this past year? How do you respond to betrayal from the people closest to you? Why should we choose you over hundreds of other applicants? I didn't hesitate. I told them the truth, that my parents had pulled their financial support without warning, that I'd learned their decision wasn't about hardship but about favoritism, that I'd been forced to fight for a future they once swore they wanted for me. But I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I refused to cast myself as a victim. "I'm not asking for this scholarship because I've suffered more than others," I said. "I'm asking because I'll make the most of it. I've already proven I'll fight for what matters, quietly, relentlessly, and without shortcuts." The panel was silent for a beat. Then one of the university reps smiled. "That's the kind of answer we remember." 90 minutes later, the call ended. I sat staring at the blank screen, my heart pounding, not from nerves, but from something deeper. Those words had been mine alone. No one had coached me. No one had spoken for me. And for the first time in weeks, it felt like that was enough. Waiting is its own kind of ache, soft but constant, like a hum under your skin. That's where I lived for the next week, caught between breath and silence, between hope and self-protection. I stayed away from the house as much as possible. The public library became my refuge: cold air, quiet corners, and the smell of old pages that reminded me of the girl I'd been before all this. I reread chapters from my anatomy and biology textbooks, just to remind myself the future was still there waiting. Every morning, I checked my email before my feet touched the floor. Every night, I lay in bed replaying the interview, every word, every pause, wondering if I'd done enough. No one at home asked what I was doing. Mom kept leaving meals outside my door, little guilt offerings wrapped in foil: lasagna, chicken pot pie, blueberry scones. I didn't toss them, but I didn't eat most of them either. It wasn't about spite, it was about truth. You can't fix shattered glass by hanging new curtains, and no one downstairs seemed willing to acknowledge the damage. Ethan tried again, slipping a note under my door: "I didn't ask for any of this. I wish things were different. I miss us." I stared at the paper for a long time. I wanted to tell him I missed us too, that I didn't blame him entirely. But the words didn't come. I folded the note, slid it into the back of my journal, and left it there, not a rejection, just a pause. Mrs. Bradford checked in on day 5. "No news yet," I texted. "That means you're still in the running," she replied. She always knew how to give hope without making promises. By day 6, I could feel myself fraying. The waiting scraped against my nerves. But instead of spiraling, I opened my laptop, not for applications or forms, but to write for myself. I poured everything onto the page: the night they told me no, the morning I found the dealership emails, the silence, the foil-covered meals, Ethan's note. And then I wrote something I didn't expect: "I'm no longer waiting for them to say sorry. I'm just waiting to stop needing it." That sentence stopped me cold because it was true. And it meant that no matter what came next, I'd already started moving forward, even if the road still felt endless. It happened on a Thursday afternoon. No build-up, no movie score moment, just the quiet ping of my phone while I stood in the checkout line at the pharmacy with shampoo and toothpaste in hand. Subject line: Anderson Foundation Final Decision. I froze. The line inched forward, customers shuffled, fluorescent lights hummed overhead, but my thumb hovered over the screen like pressing it might undo everything. I tapped it open. "Dear Emily Parker, congratulations. You have been selected as one of 4 recipients of the Anderson Foundation Scholarship for Resilient Scholars." I read it 3 times before I let myself believe it. Tuition covered. Housing, covered. Books, supplies, meals, even a monthly stipend, covered. No fine print. No hidden condition. It was mine. Tears blurred my vision right there between racks of candy bars and cough drops. I pressed a hand to my mouth and exhaled, not just relief, but validation. For every night I studied while my family watched TV, for every party I skipped because money was tight, for every smile I forced through disappointment. This wasn't just about getting to college, it was about finally being seen. Outside, the late afternoon air felt sharper, cleaner. I called the only person who deserved to hear first. Mrs. Bradford picked up on the first ring. "Did you check your email?" I asked, my voice shaking. "You got it, didn't you?" she said without hesitation. "I got it," I whispered. "I actually got it." There was a pause, then the sound of her breath releasing, like she'd been holding it for me all week. "I'm so proud of you, Emily. You earned every word of that email. Every single one." When I hung up, I didn't head home. Instead, I walked down to Maple Ridge Coffee and Books, the little cafe where this plan had first taken shape. I ordered a caramel latte and took my usual spot in the far corner, pulling out my journal. Between pages smudged with frustration and fear, I wrote something new. They didn't believe in me, but I did, and that made all the difference. That night, I didn't tell my parents. Not because I was hiding anything, but because not every win needs to be shared with the people who doubted you. Some victories belong to your younger self, the one who kept going before anyone thought to clap. Packing felt different this time. Not rushed. Not frantic. Not like I was scrambling to catch a future that might still slip away. It was steady, deliberate, a walk towards something on my own terms. I dragged my old suitcase from the back of my closet, the same one I'd used for college tours a year earlier, back when I thought my family was in my corner. Only now, I wasn't packing with hope, I was packing with certainty. Every item folded with intention, my favorite worn-in jeans, the navy blazer for my interview, my brand new Vanderbilt hoodie with the tag still dangling, because part of me hadn't dared believe I'd get to wear it until now. Mom lingered in the doorway. She didn't say much, just little fillers. "Need help with laundry? That bag might be too small. Will you text when you get there?" I smiled politely, nodded, answered only when I had to. I wasn't angry, I just didn't have the energy left to fix something she still wouldn't admit was broken. Dad never came upstairs, spent the day in the garage, working on Ethan's truck, even though it didn't need repairs. I didn't seek him out either. Some silences don't need filling once both sides have accepted them. Ethan knocked softly just before dinner. He stood in the doorway, hands shoved into his sweatshirt pockets. "You're really going?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, zipping the side pocket of my suitcase. He gave a small nod. "I guess I always knew you would." I didn't respond. "I mean," he added, "you were always the one who finished what you started." That made me pause. "I hope you're happy for me," I said. He met my eyes. "I am." And for the first time in a long while I believed him, not without guilt, not without regret, but genuinely. That night, I printed my scholarship award letter and taped it inside the lid of my suitcase, not for anyone else to see, just for me. So that on the days I might doubt myself or miss the idea of home I never truly had, I'd remember, I didn't just get here. I climbed through the cracks they tried to seal shut. The drive to Vanderbilt University was quiet. Mrs. Bradford had offered to take me, saying she had an old friend in Nashville she could visit. But I knew she just didn't want me to start this chapter alone. I didn't argue. As we turned onto campus, the trees arched overhead like a green canopy, sunlight spilling across red brick paths. Students laughed as they carried boxes, pillows, and coffee cups. The whole scene looked like something out of a movie, except it wasn't. This was my life now, mine to claim. We parked by the freshman dorms. I stepped out, stretched, and stood there for a moment, letting it all sink in. The place wasn't just beautiful, it was proof. Proof that this future was earned, not gifted. Chosen, not handed down. Mrs. Bradford smiled, popping open the trunk. "Ready?" I nodded. More than I ever thought I'd be. We hauled my bags up 3 flights of stairs, past whiteboards covered in doodles and dorm doors decorated with welcome notes in bright marker. My roommate hadn't arrived yet, so the space was still half empty, just a bare mattress, a desk, and a single window overlooking the quad. I claimed the bed by the window, set my journal on the desk, and taped a photo of my younger self, braces, wide-eyed, holding a blue ribbon from a high school science fair, above the pillow. Not because I wanted to go back to that version of me, but because I wanted her to see exactly how far we'd come. Before leaving, Mrs. Bradford lingered in the doorway. "I hope you know how proud I am of you," she said. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I wouldn't be here without you." She smiled. "You would have found a way. I just made sure the door didn't close before you walked through." With one last squeeze of my shoulder, she was gone. That night, I wandered the campus alone, past students stretched out on benches with laptops, past chalk messages scrawled across the sidewalks that read "You belong here," past buildings buzzing with laughter and possibility. I ended up on the stone steps of the library, pulling out my phone. 3 unread texts blinked back at me, one from Mom, one from Ethan, one from an unfamiliar number I knew belonged to Dad. I didn't open any of them. Not out of anger. Not for revenge. But because I no longer needed anyone's permission to enjoy the life I was building. I tilted my head to the sky, inhaled, and whispered to no one in particular, "I made it." Not just to Vanderbilt, but through the fire, through the silence, through every ounce of doubt. Orientation week blurred by in a rush of name tags, handshakes, awkward small talk, and overzealous icebreakers, and somehow I loved it. No one here knew my past. No one cared about the truck, the money, or the fractured loyalties back home. Here, I wasn't the girl trying to prove her worth to people who refused to see it. Here I was just Emily, and for the first time, that was enough. 2 days later, my roommate Sophia arrived from Colorado. She talked fast, laughed louder, and hauled in 3 suitcases packed with plants and Polaroids. She wasn't like me at all, and that was exactly what I needed. She didn't ask about my family. Instead, she wanted to know my favorite book, whether I liked peppermint tea or late-night coffee, what playlist I put on when I cleaned my room. Questions that had nothing to do with pain, and everything to do with possibility. We sat on the quad one afternoon during orientation, surrounded by hundreds of students figuring out where they fit. She nudged me. "You've got that look." "What look?" I asked. "The look people have when they've already fought a war, and still showed up smiling." I blinked at her. She wasn't wrong. That weekend, I went to a campus panel on women in medicine. Doctors, residents, and grad students, each sharing stories about being overlooked, doubted, underestimated, yet still standing. I filled pages of notes, but one sentence stayed with me: "You don't owe anyone your pain to justify your success." That night, I finally opened the messages from home. Mom's read, "Hope move-in went well. We miss you." Ethan said, "Let me know if you want me to visit sometime. No pressure." Dad's was short, "Good luck, Emily." No apologies, no explanations, no surprises. And for once, I didn't cry. Because in that moment, I understood, they didn't need to change for me to heal. I typed one message to all 3, "Thank you for reaching out. I'm settling in just fine. Right now, I'm focused on school, and I need space to grow. I hope you can respect that." I hit send, closed my laptop, and felt a peace I hadn't known in months, not because they finally understood me, but because I finally understood myself. By mid-September, I'd found a rhythm: morning coffee in the student center, biology lecture in Hall B 203, study group every Thursday, evening walks under the oak trees lining the science quad. There was comfort in the structure, but also something deeper, something I hadn't felt in years: safety. Not just the physical kind, but the kind that lets you breathe without bracing, the kind that doesn't require you to shrink for someone else's comfort. Dr. Ellis, my biology professor, called me out in the best way during office hours. "I read your first paper," he said. "You don't just understand the material, you feel it. That's rare." I laughed, a little embarrassed. "It's how I make sense of things." He leaned back in his chair. "Don't lose that. The best doctors don't just treat symptoms, they translate pain." That stuck with me. For the first time, I started thinking that maybe I wasn't here just to prove something. Maybe I was here to build something. To become someone. Not to escape my past, but to grow far beyond it. Sophia and I started hosting late-night study sessions in our dorm room. It began with just the 2 of us, then a couple of neighbors, then by the 5th week we had to move into the lounge on our floor. Some people came for flashcard drills, others for the quiet company, a mug of tea, or simply a moment to not feel alone. And somehow, I became the anchor. The girl who once felt invisible at her own kitchen table was now holding space for others to feel seen. One night, after everyone had gone, Sophia looked over at me. "You know what I think?" "What?" "I think you're going to be the kind of doctor who listens, even when people don't know how to say what's wrong." My throat tightened, because that, more than any degree, scholarship, or award, was the impact I wanted to leave behind. And even in the middle of all this newness, I didn't forget where I'd come from. The journal with the folded truck invoice still sat in my desk drawer. The scholarship email was still pinned to my bulletin board, not as a symbol of bitterness, but as a reminder of what it took to get here and why I will never let anyone else write my story for me again. If you're still listening, thank you. Because my story, this story, was never just about getting into college or winning a scholarship. It was about learning to walk away from people who claimed to love me, but only when I stayed small. There's a kind of heartbreak that doesn't come from strangers. It comes from the ones who were supposed to protect you. From the people who looked you in the eye and said, "We can't," while handing what you needed most to someone else. But here's what I've learned: you don't need their permission to rise. And you sure don't need their guilt to keep you grounded. For years, I thought if I worked hard enough, loved well enough, stayed quiet long enough, they'd finally see me. But visibility doesn't come from begging. It comes from boundaries. From choosing yourself, even when no one else does. So if you're hearing this now, maybe in your car, maybe on a late walk home, wondering if it's selfish to want more, it's not. Wanting more isn't selfish. It's sacred. You are allowed to outgrow the version of yourself that's settled. You are allowed to build a life that makes no sense to the people who doubted you. And you are allowed to say no, without explanation, without apology. I used to think forgiveness meant letting people back in. Now I know it means refusing to carry what they've never taken responsibility for. And peace, real peace, isn't always soft. Sometimes it's fierce. It arrives when you stop explaining, stop proving, and start living like you already belong, because you do. So wherever you are in your own story, starting over, standing up, or walking away, remember this: you are not invisible. You never were. You were just surrounded by people who couldn't see past the edges of their own comfort. But I see you. And if my story feels anything like yours, maybe this is the start of something new for both of us.